Hi guys, welcome back to Rapid Case Challenges Pharmacology. I'm your host, Pharmacist Tyson, and today we have something very special, alligations. Now, alligations is a mathematical method that we use quite often in pharmacy, and it can be difficult, maybe a little daunting to a few people, but we're going to dive right on in. First of all, what is alligation and what does it mean? And it's the process of calculating the proportions of two solutions that need to be added or mixed together in order to produce a required solution with a specific concentration. So let's look at it a little bit different way. What we really want is we want to know how many mils or a volume of a specific concentration do we need to add to another volume of a specific concentration to equal our final concentration, or what we really want. So when approaching equations or problems like this, there are two things to consider. Do we know our final volume or do we not know our final volume? And we will dive into each of those in just a second. So here is our question or a problem. We want 3% hypertonic saline, which is sodium chloride. That is on back order at your hospital, and you need to make 500 mils for a patient in the ER. You have normal saline, which is sodium chloride, at a 0.9%, and you have concentrated sodium chloride at a 23.4%. How much of each, how many mils, excuse the messy handwriting, got doctor's handwriting for sure. How many mils of each do you need to mix together to make a total of 500 mils of that 3% hypertonic saline? So one thing to note is we know our final volume. We know that it's going to be 500 mils. So keep that in mind. Let's start with a tic-tac-toe table. And what we do is we put our concentrations that we have in the upper corner and lower corner. And we put the concentration that we want right there in the middle. And then we go diagonally. So by going diagonally, we find the difference in those two numbers. And so the easiest way to do it is take the larger number, 3, minus the lower number, 0.9, and you get 2.1. We do the exact same thing with the other side. We go diagonally, and we find the difference between these two numbers here. Easiest way to do it is take the larger number, 23.4, minus the smaller number, 3. And so we do 23.4 minus 3, and we get 20.4. Now, the confusing part is then we go straight across like this on top and bottom, and that gives us our parts or proportions in compared to the other concentration, meaning that for every 20.4 parts of the 0.9%, we have 2.1 parts of the 23.4%. Now, when doing it in a proportion or in a ratio, that always kind of confuses me still. So what I like to do is I like to put it into percentage of final volume. And the way that we do that is we add these two numbers together. So 20.4 plus 2.1, and we get our 22.5. We then put that as our denominator for both of these. We divide that out, and that gives us a decimal or a percentage of our final volume. So by doing this, we know that 90.7% of the 500 mils is going to be the 0.9%. Alternatively, 9.3% of our 500 mils is going to be the 23.4% concentration. So now we just take that percentage, we multiply it by the final volume, and we know that 453.5 mils is that 90.7% of 500 mils. Do the same for the bottom. And to check ourselves, we can do the 453.5 plus the 46.5, and they equal 500 mils. So that is our two concentrations that need to be added together to equal 500 mils of 3% hypertonic saline or sodium chloride. If this is very confusing, go back and rewatch it. Now that you know what the final volumes are, go back, rewatch it, and see how we get there. So, but in this case, we're going to move on to our next question. Similar, you need that 3% hypertonic saline for a patient in the ER. You have the same concentrations, 0.9% and 23.4% of the sodium chloride, but we're going to see how much of your 23.4% needs to be added to a 500 ml bag of 0.9% normal saline or the sodium chloride. So for those that don't know, 500 ml bags of the NS is quite common in the hospital. And so instead of having to take 400 and some odd mils like we did before in the previous question, instead of taking 453.5 mils out of that bag, putting it into a different bag, and then adding 46.5 mils of that concentrated sodium chloride, instead of adding that to a different bag, sometimes it's easier to try to figure out how much you need to add to an already built 500 ml bag of NS. So in that case, we don't know our final volume. It could be 520 mils, it could be 570 mils. We don't know what that final concentration is. And so this is how we figure out how we can make that 3% hypertonic saline from a volume of unknown, or we don't know the final volume. So what's cool is we can do everything the exact same way as we did before. We have our concentrations in the corner, what we want in the middle, we go diagonal on both sides, and then we go straight across, and we know we find our parts right here, and then we find our denominator, and we find our concentrations, just like we did before, all right? So whatever the final volume is, we know that 90.7% of that final volume is going to be 0.9%. Whatever the final volume is, 90.7% is going to be that 0.9%. Alternatively, 9.3% of the final volume, whatever that final volume is going to be the 23.4%. Now, what is different is we already know the volume of the 0.9%. So what we're trying to do is we're going to try to figure out the final volume. And how we do that is we actually take our 500 mils and we divide it by the 90.7%. Now, by doing that, it allows us to find our final volume, which is awesome, 551.27. Now, of that 551.27 mils, we know that 500 of it is the 0.9%. So all we need to do Let's take that minus the 500. We know that our volume that needs to be added to the 500 ml bag is 51.27 mils of that 23.4% sodium chloride. I know it can be confusing. Once you understand it, it makes perfect sense, I promise. And so, like I said, recommend that you go back and rewatch it. I really want to thank you for taking the time to watch this tutorial. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, Pharmacist Tyson. You can email me. You can message me on the website, rapidcasechallenges.com. You can find and ask any questions on any of our social media platforms, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube. There's many ways to reach out, and I'm here to help any way that I can. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.